Storm bells tolled as crimson light bled across the citadel walls, and the crowd shrank from the crackling air. Elara Wyn clutched her chest as heat gathered there like a living star. Miralise said, "Breathe before it takes you." Kael Thorn was dragged past iron gates by masked wardens, and his eyes found hers like a vow held in silence. Elara whispered, "I will not lose you," and the words shook like glass. Lord Malric watched from a balcony, smiling as if destiny were a ledger he had already balanced. The sky roared, and the Heartfire surged, painting sigils across the stones. Finn Arlen shoved through panic, shouting, "This way, Elara," but her feet rooted to grief. Mira hissed, "Choose restraint or ruin." Elara answered, "I choose him," and the power leapt, tearing banners to ash. Kael said, "Hold on," though chains bit his wrists and hope burned thin. The eruption hurled wind and embers, and the city gasped at the birth of a myth. Malric said, "Let her heart speak," as if the trap required only time. Elara's pulse became a drum, and every beat promised salvation or catastrophe. Silence fell in jagged pieces as smoke thinned, and the courtyard reeked of rain and ash. Elara swayed as if a tide had retreated and left her hollow. Mira said, "Control is mercy to those you love." Kael stood beyond the gate, a dark silhouette held by iron and duty. Finn said, "We move before the wardens regroup," and fear hid behind his grin. Elara tasted copper resolve and stared at the cracks her power carved. Lord Malric descended the stair, slow as a verdict. Malric said, "A heart that shapes the world must be properly kept." Elara answered, "It will not beat for you." Mirera touched her wrist, pulse racing under calloused fingers. Kael said, "Find the key, I can hold." Thunder rumbled like regret. The city watched from doorways, doors half shut, prayers half said. Elara gathered herself, and the ember inside settled to a fierce whisper. They slipped into the library cloisters where water dripped from ancient gutters and vellum smelled of dust and secrets. Mira said, "There is an older key than steel." Finn rummaged through scroll bins, muttering oaths that sounded like prayers. Elara traced a mural of a crowned heart and felt a thrumming answer. Kael's voice haunted the corridor like a tether. Elara said, "If fate is a door, I will break it." Mira replied, "Better to learn the hinge." A hidden panel clicked under Elara's palm, and cold air sighed out. Finn said, "I knew it almost." The passage sloped toward the gatehouse, where the wardens would circle back. Mira pressed a talisman into Elara's hand, its edges warm as memory. Elara whispered, "Hold, Kael," and the ember brightened to a steady glow. The secret stair spat them into the gatehouse antechamber, where gears slept behind oak panels. Elara felt Kael's presence like warmth through stone. Finn said, "Wardens change shifts in breaths, not minutes." Mira marked a chalk sigil near the lockbox. Lord Malric's emblem seared the iron, a serpent biting its tail. Elara said, "He thinks circles keep me in." Finn pried, metal squealed, and somewhere a bell shivered awake. Mira said, "Quiet is gone, act is all." Elara pressed the talisman to the plate, and lines of light traced old paths. The lock sighed, then bit back, sparks snapping her knuckles. She did not flinch. Elara said, "Open," and the Heartfire pulsed without fury, a measured beat that matched her breath. Gears turned like awakening giants. The door thought about mercy. The gate yawned and revealed Kael in the half-light, rain threading his hair like silver wires. Kael said, "You found the hinge." Elara stepped forward, heat low and disciplined, and chains trembled. Mirera said, "2 breaths, no more." Finn tossed a small pick with a flourish that barely hid his shaking. Elara said, "Walk when I tell you." Lord Malric's voice slid in from the hall, smooth as a blade in silk. Malric said, "Love makes excellent leverage." Elara met his gaze and felt the ember test its cage. Kael said, "Ignore him," and the words steadied the room. The pick clicked, iron yielded, time thinned. Elara said, "Now," and they moved as one. The storm outside bent sideways, as if the world held its breath for their choice. Mist clung to the valley as dawn fractured into pale streaks, and Elara Wyn walked as if every step weighed the choice she feared. Miralace, said control, grows where discipline roots. Finn Arlen skipped stones across puddles, laughter forced like a mask. Kael Thorn marched close, his gaze fixed on the road ahead, yet every glance toward Elara carried questions unsaid. Elara whispered, "What if my heart is only ruin?" Mira replied, "Then ruin must be shaped, not loosed." Kael muttered, "Or guarded, until no one dares reach it." The trees swayed as if listening, branches clawing skyward. Finn said, "Secrets grow heavier when carried alone," his voice brittle. Elara's chest warmed faintly, a reluctant ember that pulsed against her ribs. The journey bent them toward the ruins where answers waited, but doubt walked between them like another shadow. They reached the carved arch of the ruin, where ivy choked forgotten glyphs. Mira traced the runes, voice low. Mira said, "These walls remember what blood forgets." Elara's hand hovered, her pulse matching the faint glow in the stone. Kael stepped closer, saying, "If this place demands pain, it will take mine first." Elara shook her head, whispering, "No, it calls for me." Finn muttered, "I preferred locked gates to talking walls." The ground rumbled, dust spilling like memory. Mira said, "This is the heart's reflection. See yourself, or be consumed." Elara pressed her palm, and the glyphs flared, casting firelight shadows across them all. Fear met longing in the air, and the ruin stirred awake. Inside the ruin, pillars leaned like old guardians, and echoes carried whispers that were not their own. Elara said, "It knows me." Kael's hand brushed her shoulder, steady as stone. Kael said, "Then let it know you are stronger than its fear." Finn stumbled on loose tiles, muttering, "Or hungrier than its patience." Mira said, "Every relic asks for balance, heart for heart." The chamber's core revealed a pool black as ink, surface rippling though untouched. Elara knelt, fingers trembling above it. A reflection stared back, eyes ablaze with fire she did not yet claim. She whispered, "Am I salvation or curse?" The water hissed, and the ruin breathed in answer. The surface split with a flare, and images spiraled across the chamber walls, kingdoms aflame, lovers parted, chains reforged. Elara gasped, "It shows me the cost." Mira said, "The heart cannot choose without seeing all paths." Kael's eyes darkened, whispering, "Then it shows us doomed." Finn said, "Or stubborn enough to try anyway." Elara touched the water, heat burning through skin. Her heartbeat thundered, and the chamber quaked. Mira raised her staff, chanting words older than memory. Elara said, "If love is forbidden, then why does it burn brighter than destiny?" The water flared, and silence fell heavy. The visions collapsed into a single searing mark on the chamber floor. A heart split by flame and chain. Elara staggered, whispering, "It is bound to me." Kael caught her before she fell, saying, "Then we fight it together." Mira said, "Fate binds, but choice cuts." Finn wiped his brow, muttering, "Next time, let's fight something that bleeds." The ruin groaned, stones cracking as if sealing itself. Elara steadied, ember in her chest now pulsing steady and sharp. She said, "No chains will command me." Kael nodded, a rare flicker of relief softening his gaze. The ruin swallowed its secrets again, leaving them with one truth: the heart's power could never remain hidden. Moonlight spilled across the ruined courtyard, as silence pressed heavy between them. Elara Wyn traced the glowing scar on the stone, her breath shallow. Kael Thorn said, "You risked more than any oath could demand." Elara whispered, "And yet I would again, though it breaks me." Finn Arlen sat on a toppled column, muttering, "Romance and ruin, my least favorite pairing." Mira Liss stood apart, her staff resting, gaze turned inward. She said, "Love will fuel your flame, but it may consume us quickly." Elara turned toward Kael, her voice unsteady. "Do you fear me?" Kael's jaw tightened, but his eyes softened. He said, "I fear losing you, not your fire." The ember in her chest pulsed, caught between longing and dread. Above them the stars seemed to lean closer, as if listening to their fragile confession. They moved toward the forest edge, torches struggling against mist. Finn said, "Every tale with magic ruins ends with someone screaming." Mira replied, "Then let us guide it elsewhere." Elara brushed against Kael, the touch sparking heat beneath her skin. Elara said, "I cannot hold back when he tempts the fire." Kael answered, "Then let me carry the weight with you." The air thickened, scented with moss and rain-soaked earth. Shadows stretched long, dancing to torchlight rhythm. Finn muttered, "If this forest starts whispering too, I am done." Mira's voice lowered, "Listen anyway. The world speaks in ways hearts ignore." Elara breathed deep, wishing her heart would obey reason, but instead it quickened at Kael's nearness. The forest opened to a clearing where runic stones rose like teeth. Mira whispered, "A trial waits here." Elara stepped forward, light blooming beneath her feet. Kael caught her wrist. Kael said, "Not alone." She looked at him, fire in her eyes, and whispered, "It calls only me." Finn sighed, muttering, "She says that every cursed mile." The stones hummed, vibrations crawling through soil and bone. Mira said, "Answer truly, or the stones will bleed lies into your soul." Elara's voice shook as she declared, "I love beyond fate, though fate forbids." The runes flared crimson, heat bending the air. Kael's grip did not loosen, though shadows clawed toward him. Elara's heart thundered, torn between magic and desire. The runes cracked, and a shadow figure emerged, its form shifting like smoke. Elara gasped, "It wears my fear." Kael drew steel, eyes locked on the shifting dark. Mira warned, "Blades cannot strike what lives within." Finn said, "Well then, we are very doomed." The shadow lunged, mirroring Elara's movements. Elara raised her hand, flame spiraling out. The figure recoiled, screaming in her own voice. Kael shouted, "You are stronger than what haunts you." Elara's chest seared, but she stood taller, forcing light into the figure's hollow form. She said, "You are mine to master, not my master." The shadow fractured, scattering into sparks that hissed against stone. Silence claimed the clearing again. When silence returned, Elara collapsed to her knees, chest still glowing faintly. Kael knelt beside her, saying, "Your strength is terrifying, yet it is yours." Elara's eyes brimmed, whispering, "But it demands more than I can give." Mira said, "Each trial carves you, but choice remains your chisel." Finn offered a shaky smile, "And if chisels fail, I've got rope." The runes faded, leaving the clearing calm, but the air still tasted of fire and sorrow. Elara leaned into Kael, her breath uneven. She whispered, "If love is weakness, let me be weak." Kael's grip steadied her, his silence louder than vows. The night seemed to pause, listening to a bond neither destiny nor ruin could erase. The ruined forest gave way to an ancient hall carved into the cliffside, its doors etched with serpents biting their tails. Elara Wyn brushed trembling fingers across the sigils, whispering, "It knows my blood." Mira said, "The truth has always waited." Kael Thorn stepped closer, his hand hovering near hers as though to shield her from unseen harm. Kael said, "If the truth wounds, I will carry the scar with you." Finn Arlen kicked a stone nervously, muttering, "I already hate this place." The doors groaned open, spilling torchlight that smelled of iron and secrets. Elara said, "Then let the secrets come." Mira's staff thudded as she entered. Voice low, "Prepare, for what binds here does not forgive." Inside the hall, fire pits roared, casting shadows that twisted across serpentine columns. Elara stared at a mural of a heart split in two, chains coiled around each side. She whispered, "It is me." Mira said, "It is your lineage." Kael's voice hardened, "Then your family bound you before birth." Elara's throat tightened as memory pressed heavy. Finn muttered, Good families leave farms, not curses. The flames surged higher, revealing inscriptions that pulsed faintly like veins. Mira touched the wall, murmuring, "The curse was not cast on you, but through you." Elara stepped back, heart pounding, and the chamber seemed to breathe in rhythm with her pulse. Elara pressed her hand to the mural, and heat surged into her veins, visions ripping across her mind. She saw her mother's tear-streaked face and a sigil burning into her chest as a child. She whispered, "They sealed me." Mira said, "Bloodlines carry more than memory." Kael's grip tightened on her shoulder. Kael said, "Then we break their seal." Elara gasped as the sigil on her chest flared, chains of fire curling from her skin into the air. Finn stumbled back, muttering, "Definitely cursed." The chamber trembled, dust raining from the ceiling. Elara said, "If this bond is theirs, I will make it mine." Her voice cracked, but the fire bent closer to her command. A sudden laugh echoed, and Silas Vey emerged from the shadows, his cloak shimmering with false faces. Elara gasped, "You followed us." Silas said, "I was here before you dreamed of it." Kael's blade rang as he drew steel. Kael said, "You deceive for coin or cause?" Silas smiled, "Both, perhaps neither." Mira's voice shook. "A shapeshifter thrives where trust weakens." Finn muttered, "Wonderful, another shadow to fear." Silas stepped closer, eyes glinting with secrets. Silas said, "The chains that bind you bind the kingdom too. Break them, and blood will drown this land." Elara's pulse raced, torn between truth and trickery. The chamber quaked as runes lit violently, and the fire pits roared higher. Elara shouted, "Truth or lies, I will not be chained." Kael stepped beside her, steel raised, saying, "Then I stand with you." Silas smirked, "Stand too close, and her fire will consume you." Finn muttered, "And here I thought the ruins were loud enough." Mira lifted her staff, chanting words of sealing. Elara's chest erupted in flame, and the mural cracked apart, chains breaking in a storm of sparks. Elara whispered, "It is mine now." Kael's eyes caught hers, unspoken vow between them. The hall groaned as though the cliff itself feared her choice. The path bent toward the river gorge where twilight painted the waters in copper and violet. Elara Wyn walked slow, her chest ember glowing beneath her cloak. Kael Thorn said, "Your fire grows restless." Elara whispered, "It grows hungry." Mira Liss pressed her staff to the earth, murmuring, "This gorge remembers battles where hearts turned to ash." Finn Arlen skipped ahead, muttering, "Let's not add ours to the history books." The wind carried whispers like voices that were not their own. Kael said, "Whatever truth awaits, you are not alone." Elara's eyes softened, though the fire inside raged louder. She said, "Then walk with me, even if it ends in flame." The gorge walls trembled with unseen memory. They reached the bridge of broken stone where shadows lingered. A figure stood waiting, armor dulled and eyes haunted. Elara gasped, "Darian." Once a hero, now a ghost of fire and sorrow. Darian Vey said, "You carry what should have been mine." Kael's jaw tightened, blade half raised. Kael said, "Step away from her." Darian's voice cracked. "I stepped away once, and it damned me." Mira whispered, "The fallen return to claim what they lost." Finn muttered, "Another cursed reunion, delightful." Elara's heart ached, whispering, "You were lost to me long ago." Darian's gaze burned with regret. Darian said, "Not lost, stolen, and I will take it back." Steel rang as Kael blocked Darian's sudden strike, sparks scattering into the gorge. Elara shouted, "Stop!" Darian's face twisted, torn between rage and longing. He said, "They chained my love and left me hollow." Kael gritted, "Love does not wound like this." Mira's voice thundered, "He is bound by grief turned poison." Darian's blade clashed again, fire rippling along its edge. Finn ducked low, muttering, "Definitely should have stayed home." Elara stepped forward, flame pulsing from her chest. Elara said, "Darian, if love still lives in you, prove it now." For a heartbeat, sorrow flashed in his eyes, then the fury returned. Elara's fire burst outward, halting both blades as heat shimmered the air. She shouted, "This fight ends with me!" Darian trembled, staring at her, tears streaking ash across his face. He whispered, "You were my heart, yet fate gave you another." Kael lowered his sword slightly, saying, "No fate chose this, we did." Meera said, "Chains can bind even the noblest heart." Finn muttered, "Yes, but must they bind us here forever?" Elara stepped closer, her glow enveloping Darian. She said, "You can choose release, or let grief devour what remains." Darian's hands shook, torn between surrender and vengeance. The gorge stilled, waiting. The choice fractured in Darian's chest, his blade dropping as chains of fire cracked around him. He whispered, "Forgive me, though I cannot forgive myself." Elara caught him as he sank, whispering, "Your love still lingers, even broken." Kael stood close, silent but steadfast. Meera said, "Redemption weighs heavier than ruin, yet it is still a path." Finn muttered, "I will carry him if no one else does." Darian's breath rattled, his final gaze on Elara soft with the echo of what was. The fire around them dimmed, leaving only the river's roar. Elara pressed her hand to her chest, the ember steady but sorrowful. She whispered, "I will carry this choice forever." Dawn crawled over the citadel, as bells tolled a warning no one wanted to name. Elara Wyn felt the ember tighten, as if bracing for a blow. Finn Arlen said, "We slip through the west stairs before patrols wake." Meera Liss frowned, reading the wind like a scripture. Kael Thorn said, "Something is wrong with the quiet." A guard column marched by, every step too synchronized to be human will. Silas Vey stepped from their ranks, wearing Finn's grin. Silas said, "You never check the shadow behind your friend." Finn staggered from a side door, bound and bruised. Elara whispered, "How long?" Silas laughed, "Long enough to map your hearts." Lord Malrek's banner rose over the tower, scales gleaming like a verdict. Kael said, "Stay behind me," as steel found his hand, and resolve set his eyes. The courtyard filled with wardens, whose eyes reflected the same cold intent. Malrek's voice poured from braziers as if the fire itself obeyed him. Lord Malrek said, "A heart that shapes kingdoms must be contained." Elara felt the ember buck like a wild thing. Kael said, "Do not let him set your rhythm." Meera whispered, "Breathe on the beat you choose." Chains of light arced from the walls, seeking her pulse. Elara said, "I am not yours," and the heartfire ripped outward. Stones split, banners erupted, rain turned to steam. Finn shouted, left flank open, even as fear shook him. Malrek laughed. "Good, show me the shape of your ruin." Elara stood in the storm she made, and refused to bow. The city groaned as ward runes ignited across rooftops, a net of fire drawing tight. Kael said, "He is sealing the district." Elara looked to the alleys where families watched with shuttered hope. Meera said, "Break one knot, the weave unravels." Silas called, "Follow me if you trust liars, before slipping into smoke." Finn spat blood, saying, "He knows a way in." Kael nodded, duty at war with doubt. Elara said, "We use the shadow's path and keep our light." They ran through rain and ember snow, feet hammering prophecy into stone. Malrek's command rolled over them like iron surf. Lord Malrek said, "Kneel, and your city lives." Elara answered only with speed. They reached the Heartfire where the city's ancient wards braided into one pulse. Meera said, "Unbind here, and the net falls or everything breaks." Kael took Elara's hands, rain cooling fire that fought to rise. Kael said, "If it kills me, do it anyway." Elara flinched as the embers surged toward him like a tide claiming shore. Elara whispered, "I will not trade you for stone." Finn said, "We need both, the city and the fool with a sword." Silas watched, unreadable, even to himself. Mireille pressed her palm to Elara's back, anchoring breath and will. Elara said, Share the weight, not the wound. Kael nodded, and their foreheads touched like a vow forged without words. The tower began to hum. Malrek entered with a phalanx cane striking stone in cruel rhythm. Lord Malrek said, "Offer the heart, or the wards invert." The floor sigils rotated, their light turning the color of bruises. Elara felt the ember recoil, and then flare, as if refusing to be named by him. Kael stepped forward, blade low and certain. Kael said, "You will not touch her." Silas murmured, "Choose swiftly, or the choice makes you." Mira lifted her staff, voice weaving counter-harmonics into the tower's hum. Finn said, "On your mark, I break the last lock." Elara drew in the storm and the fear and the love, and shaped them into one beat. Elara said, "Begin," and the spire exploded into light and war. The tower shook as Malrek's will surged, chains of shadow clawing toward Elara Wyn. Kael Thorn said, "This is where we end it." Elara's fire erupted, but it trembled under the weight of destiny. Merilis raised her staff and cried, "Bind his reach, not her heart." Finn Arlen threw himself at the mechanism, gears grinding under his desperate pull. Malrek roared, "The heart belongs to the kingdom." Elara shouted, "No, it belongs to love." Sparks and ash rained as her fire met his shadow, the clash tearing stone from the walls. The kingdom itself seemed to hold its breath. The chambers split, light and dark devouring each other in spirals. Elara's voice broke Kael, "I cannot hold it alone." Kael caught her hand, his strength grounding hers. Kael said, "Then we burn together." Malrek sneered, "Fools chained by affection." Silas Vey appeared in shifting guise, whispering, "Choice tilts kingdoms, girl." Mira shouted, "Decide, before the world decides for you." Elara's chest pulsed, love and fire threading as one. She whispered, "I choose us," and the flame grew steady. Malrek recoiled as cracks raced through his shadow. Malrek thrust his cane and the shadows lunged, but Kael blocked, his body seared by the backlash. Elara screamed, "No." Kael gritted, "Better me than you." The embers surged beyond her restraint, wrapping Kael in fire as well. Finn cried, "The tower won't hold." Miara's chant rose, trying to weave protection, but the wards strained. Malrek staggered, his eyes wide at the light piercing him. Elara said, "This ends with your chains broken." Malrek whispered, "Or with you destroyed." Their powers collided in one last shattering storm. The storm broke in silence as Malrek collapsed, his shadow dissolving like smoke in rain. Elara fell to her knees, chest ember dim but alive. Kael staggered, burnt but breathing, saying, "Still here." She clutched his hand, whispering, "You should not have borne it." Kael smiled faintly, would again without regret. Finn sat heavily, laughing and crying at once. Mira lowered her staff, eyes heavy with relief and sorrow. Silas leaned in the shadows, murmuring, "Love conquers, but at a cost." The tower groaned, but the kingdom's wards fell silent, free at last. The storm cleared, dawn spilling gold over broken stones. Elara stood at the edge, gazing at the kingdom below, her ember calm at last. Kael joined her, his arms steadying her. Elara whispered, "Love saved me, but it demands everything." Kael said, "Then let it demand, for I will not leave." Finn called, "Try not to make this a habit," though his grin was soft. Mira said, "The heart has spoken, and the world is changed." Silas vanished into mist, leaving only questions. Elara pressed her hand to Kael's, and together they faced the rising sun. The kingdom's future was uncertain, but her choice was forever carved in fire.